You probably believe that when you grab a bottle of red sauce from the shelf or squeeze it onto your chips at the local takeaway, you know exactly what you are eating. You assume it is ketchup, a simple, honest blend of tomatoes, vinegar, sugar, and spices. The data, however, suggests a much more disturbing reality is unfolding across the United Kingdom's grocery sector. There is a silent flood of condiment fraud operating in the shadows of the aisle, where manufacturers are pumping out millions of liters of red slurry that legally barely qualifies as food. But here is what is fascinating. Many of these brands are scientifically engineered to trick your brain into perceiving quality while selling you little more than colored starch and acidified water. Let me show you how this changes everything you thought you knew about your Sunday morning fry-up. You're watching Protect Our Cart, defending your weekly shop. If you value its depth of analysis and want to keep your kitchen safe from deception, subscribing ensures you don't miss the next investigation. To understand the scale of this deception, we first have to look at the unique position ketchup holds in the British culinary psyche. It is not merely a condiment, it is a cultural necessity. From the bacon buddy to the fish and chip supper, that specific hit of umami and acid is the anchor of the meal. For decades, one or two giant corporations held a monopoly, setting a global standard where the primary ingredient was, unsurprisingly, tomatoes. But as food inflation spiraled and supply chains fractured, a dangerous gap opened in the market. A vacuum emerged for value alternatives. This is where the deception begins. We are not talking about legitimate supermarket-owned brands that simply use fewer spices or cheaper packaging. We are investigating the imposters, predatory brands that exist solely to undercut the competition by removing the expensive ingredients entirely and replacing them with chemical mimics. The primary ingredient in authentic ketchup is tomatoes. In the fake brands we have uncovered, the primary ingredient is often water, thickened with modified maize starch and dyed with industrial colorants to replicate the vibrant red of a ripe tomato. It is a chemistry experiment, not a recipe. When you pour a premium sauce, it flows with a specific viscosity, a thixotropic quality, where it remains solid until shaken. These fake brands do not behave the same way. They either run like tap water or glop out in gelatinous, cohesive chunks because the starch structure hasn't been balanced correctly. You have likely experienced this without realizing it. That watery red liquid that separates on the plate and ruins your chips before the sauce even comes out, that is the first forensic sign of a formulation that relies on separation because there is no natural tomato pectin to hold the matrix together. But why does this matter? Is this simply a case of being a food snob? Absolutely not. This is a critical consumer protection issue. Many of these brands use clever, borderline illegal labeling tactics to hide their deficiencies. They utilize imagery of Italian vines, rustic farms, and sun-drenched fields, yet the ingredient list reveals a horror show of preservatives, acidity regulators, and stabilizers designed to extend shelf life indefinitely. They are selling you a product that costs fractions of a penny to manufacture for a price that still feels like a bargain, extracting profit directly from your ignorance. This is the red gold rush of the modern grocery sector. Unscrupulous manufacturers know that if they make the bottle look right and the color look right, you won't check the back label until it is too late. Furthermore, there is the insidious issue of sugar masking. To compensate for the severe lack of tomato flavor, which provides natural sweetness and savory notes, these fake brands pump the mixture full of cheap sweeteners or high fructose corn syrup equivalents. You end up consuming a sugar bomb with a pH level so acidic it strips the enamel off your teeth, all under the guise of a savory condiment. It creates a hyper-palatable spike that tricks your taste buds, but leaves a metallic, artificial aftertaste that lingers. This is the hallmark of the fake ketchup, the finish. Real tomatoes leave a mellow, fruity finish. These imposters leave a chemical burn. We have spent months scouring the bottom shelves of budget supermarkets, independent corner shops, and cash-and-carry wholesalers to find the worst offenders. We found brands that contain as little as 12% tomato concentrate. To put that in perspective, industry-standard premium ketchup sits around 148 grams of tomatoes per 100 grams of sauce. The difference is astronomical. You are essentially buying red vinegar water. We also uncovered brands that don't even call themselves tomato ketchup on the fine print, opting for tomato sauce or red sauce to legally bypass the minimum tomato content requirements set by food standards agencies. It is a legal loophole that allows them to sell you starch paste as a premium topping.
The investigation led us deep into the murky world of the chippy supply chain. Have you ever wondered why the sauce at the chip shop tastes different? Often it is because they are buying these bulk fake brands to save costs. It is a systemic issue where quality is sacrificed for margin at every step of the chain, and the end consumer, you, is the one left with a ruined meal and an intake of questionable additives. As we prepare to name and shame the 8 specific brands you need to purge from your pantry, understand that this is not just about bad taste. It is about an industry that thinks it can fool you. It is about protecting the integrity of what we eat. The brands we are about to expose rely on your apathy. They bank on you grabbing the cheapest bottle without looking. Today, that stops. We are going to break down exactly which bottles are guilty, looking at the data, the ingredients, and the deceptive packaging that landed them on our blacklist. Let's begin with the most pervasive offender, a bottle you have likely seen sitting on the sticky tables of seaside cafes and late-night kebab houses. We call this brand number 1, the condiment decoy. The first thing you must understand is a matter of legal definitions. Under UK food standards, to be labeled tomato ketchup, a product generally requires a specific minimum tomato solids content. The brands on our blacklist know this, and they have found a way around it. Look closely at the label of that budget bottle in the discount aisle. Does it actually say ketchup? Or does it say tomato sauce, red sauce, or the even more elusive tomato condiment? This isn't just semantics, it is an admission of guilt. Brand number 1, often sold in clear, unbranded squeeze bottles or massive 4-liter catering tubs, falls into this category. When we analyzed the composition, the primary ingredient wasn't tomatoes, it was water. To compensate for the lack of tomato fiber, these manufacturers pump the mixture full of modified maize starch. This is why when you squeeze it onto a plate, it doesn't mound naturally like a fruit puree. Instead, it stands up in a gelatinous, shivering heap. You are essentially eating red-dyed wallpaper paste flavored with synthetic acetic acid. The texture is the giveaway. If your sauce wobbles like jelly rather than flows like a liquid, you are dealing with a starch-heavy imposter that barely qualifies as food. Moving down the aisle, we encounter brand number 2, which we've dubbed the Vinegar Bomb. This variety is specifically engineered for the lower end of the fish and chip shop market. While traditional ketchup balances acidity with sweetness and umami, this formulation is designed solely to strip the grease from your tongue. The tomato content here is so negligible that the manufacturers rely on aggressive acidity regulators and spirit vinegar to provide any sensation of flavor.
The danger here isn't just culinary, it is physiological. The pH levels in these cheaper, fake brands are often significantly lower than premium brands to extend shelf life without natural preservatives. You are dousing your food in a corrosive acid bath that masks the flavor of whatever lies beneath it. It creates a sharp, metallic aftertaste that lingers at the back of the throat, a chemical burn that many consumers have sadly come to accept as the taste of chip shop sauce. But real ketchup should taste of fruit, not just acid. If you find yourself reaching for water immediately after tasting a drop of sauce, check the bottle. You have likely fallen victim to the vinegar bomb. If this deep dive into the chemistry of your condiments is helping you spot the imposters in your pantry, subscribing ensures you are alerted when we expose the next aisle of the supermarket. Now we must address a more insidious category, brand number 3, the American-style imposter. These bottles often feature stars, stripes, or bald eagles on the label, capitalizing on the UK consumer's assumption that American ketchup is the gold standard of indulgence. However, these are rarely imported products. They are usually manufactured domestically in industrial parks, formulated to mimic the high sugar profile of US brands using cheaper substitutes. Instead of sugar or even traditional glucose syrup, our analysis of these American-style brands revealed a heavy reliance on high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners like sucralose to spike the sweetness without the cost of real sugar. This creates a cloying artificial sweetness that hits the palate instantly and vanishes just as quickly, leaving a hollow chemical void. The deception here is twofold. They are selling you a fake cultural heritage and a fake flavor profile. They rely on the bold, patriotic packaging to distract you from the ingredient list, which often reads more like a chemistry set than a recipe. You are paying a premium for an American taste that is actually a bottom-tier slurry of thickeners and sweeteners produced for pennies on the pound. This brings us to brand number 4, perhaps the most cynical of them all, the Economy Red. You will find this on the bottom shelves of major supermarkets, often in white and red branding that mimics the market leaders. It looks familiar, it feels safe. But the Economy Red is a masterclass in dilution. Our investigation found that some of these budget lines contain as little as 60 grams of tomatoes per 100 grams of sauce. Compare that to the standard 140 grams found in reputable brands.
Where did the rest of the tomato go? It didn't. It was never there. To achieve the correct shade of red without the requisite amount of lycopene, the natural pigment in tomatoes, these brands often lean on colorants and extracts. If you were to strip away the dye, you would be left with a pale grayish-beige sludge. The vibrancy of the red in these economy bottles is a lie, designed to trigger the appetite appeal that the ingredients themselves cannot provide. When you cook with it, the deception becomes obvious. Premium ketchup caramelizes and deepens in color, while the economy red splits, separating into a watery pool of oil and vinegar, revealing its unstable, cheap construction. We are halfway through the list, and the offenses are escalating from mere dilution to active chemical substitution. As we move to the next 4 brands, the tactics become even more sophisticated, targeting the health-conscious consumer with labels that promise natural ingredients while delivering anything but. These next offenders are likely sitting in your fridge right now, hiding behind green labels and buzzwords that suggest health, while pumping your system full of additives that have no place in a simple tomato sauce. Number 5 on our avoidance list is a prime example of this health halo manipulation, a brand that capitalizes on the modern fear of refined sugar to sell you a product that is arguably worse. We are talking about the stevia-sweetened or 50% less sugar varieties that have begun flooding the condiment aisle, specifically the budget tier versions produced by Vitality Red and similar generic health-focused labels. On the surface, the proposition seems responsible. Reduce the sugar, save the calories. But when you remove sugar, which provides not just sweetness but viscosity and mouthfeel, you have to replace that bulk with something else. In the case of Vitality Red, that replacement is a cocktail of xanthan gum and guar gum, industrial thickeners that give the sauce a texture less like pureed tomatoes and more like hair gel. When you pour this substance, it doesn't flow, it slides. It moves as a single gelatinous unit, landing on your plate with a disturbing, shivering wobble. The taste is even more betraying. Without the natural caramelization of sugar to balance the acidity of the vinegar, the flavor profile becomes sharp, metallic, and chemical. The aftertaste is cloying, coating the tongue in a synthetic sweetness that lingers for minutes, ruining the palate for whatever meal you actually intended to enjoy. You are paying a premium for a product that has had the most expensive ingredient, real tomatoes and sugar, removed and replaced with cheap chemical binders. It is a masterclass in marketing a deficit as a benefit.
This brings us to number 6, a brand that commits a different kind of fraud, the heritage trap. You have likely seen bottles adorned with Union Jacks, illustrations of quaint English farmhouses, and bold serif fonts proclaiming traditional British recipe. One prominent offender in this category, often found in discount bins near the checkout, markets itself as Old Empire Tomato Ketchup. The branding is designed to evoke nostalgia, suggesting a product made in small batches in a Suffolk kitchen. However, if you turn the bottle over and read the microscopic text near the barcode, the illusion shatters. These sauces are frequently manufactured in industrial mega facilities thousands of miles away, where regulations on tomato paste definitions are significantly looser than UK standards. The British recipe is a legal loophole. It refers to the style of the sauce, not the origin of the ingredients or the location of the factory. Inside the bottle, you are getting a product that relies heavily on glucose-fructose syrup, the UK labeling equivalent of high-fructose corn syrup. It is an aggressive, piercing sweetener that lacks the rounded depth of cane sugar or beet sugar. It hits the palate instantly and overwhelms the tomato notes entirely. If you care about transparency in the food supply chain and believe that labels should reflect reality rather than marketing fantasies, supporting this channel allows us to continue funding these deep dive investigations into what really ends up on your table. The deception of the heritage brand is not just in the geography, it is in the tomato concentration. To qualify as ketchup, there are minimum standards for tomato solids, but brands like Old Empire skirt the absolute bottom edge of this legal limit. To mask the lack of actual fruit, they overdose the mixture with spice extracts, usually a harsh clove or cinnamon synthetic flavoring that attempts to distract your tongue from the watery, insipid base. It is a condiment that tastes of spices and syrup, with the tomato merely a distant, fading memory. Then we arrive at number 7, perhaps the most cynical entry on the list, the gastropub imitator. This is the brand that tries to upsell you by packaging the same low-quality slurry in a heavy, oddly shaped glass bottle with a matte black label. Brands like Chef's Selection or Bistro Reserve charge nearly triple the price of the standard store brand, relying entirely on the weight of the glass to convey quality. They use buzzwords like sun-ripened or vine-ripened, terms that are essentially meaningless in industrial agriculture,
every tomato is ripened on the vine until the machine harvests it.
The reality inside the glass is a tragedy of chemistry. Because they are trying to emulate a rustic texture, they often add firming agents like calcium chloride to the tomato paste before processing, which prevents the tomato cells from breaking down fully. Instead of a smooth, rich sauce, you get a product that feels gritty and granular, as if it has been thickened with sand. Furthermore, to achieve that deep, dark red color associated with premium ketchup, some of these brands utilize caramel IV coloring, an additive that darkens the sauce artificially. You aren't seeing the rich red of concentrated lycopene. You are seeing a cosmetic tint added to hide the pale, oxidized reality of the cheap paste beneath. When you conduct a flow test on a white ceramic plate, the difference is stark. A real premium ketchup will hold its shape in a high mound, slowly spreading. The gastropub fake, despite its thickeners, will often weep, leaking a clear, watery ring of vinegar and preservative fluid around the edge of the dollop within seconds. This weeping is the hallmark of a sauce that is chemically unstable, a product fighting against its own cheap construction. That separation is your visual cue that the product relies on mechanical force rather than chemical integrity to hold itself together. But if the gastropub variety is a disappointment, the seventh brand on our list is an outright health hazard disguised as a virtuous choice. We are talking about the wellness category, specifically brands like Vitality Red or similar no added sugar variants found in the diet sections of major UK supermarkets. These brands prey on the diabetic and health-conscious consumer by removing the sugar, which is a natural preservative and texture agent in traditional ketchup. However, to compensate for the loss of viscosity and mouthfeel, they have to overload the mixture with industrial thickeners like xanthan gum and guar gum. When you pour this onto a plate, it doesn't flow, it plops like a gelatinous solid. But the real crime is the flavor profile. To mask the acidity of the vinegar without sugar, they utilize intense artificial sweeteners like sucralose or stevia. The problem is that your palate expects a savory, umami-rich experience from ketchup. When your tongue detects the high-intensity, metallic sweetness of an artificial agent mixed with onion powder and tomato concentrate, it creates a cognitive dissonance, a flavor that feels fundamentally wrong and chemical. You are essentially paying a premium price for red-dyed starch gel that ruins the meal it is meant to enhance. If you are trying to reduce sugar, you are better off using a smaller amount of high-quality real ketchup than drowning your food in this laboratory-engineered substitute.
This brings us to the final and most pervasive offender, the catering bulk masquerade. These are the 1-liter squeezy bottles, often labeled with generic names like Chef's Choice or Kitchen King, frequently sold in discount stores or the value aisle. They are designed to look like the professional supplies used in chip shops, triggering a nostalgia for that specific takeaway taste. Do not be fooled. Real chip shop vinegar is often a non-brewed condiment, and these ketchups follow the same philosophy of synthetic imitation. When we analyzed the ingredient list of these bulk bottles, the tomato content dropped to a shocking low. While a standard Heinz bottle contains around 148 grams of tomatoes per 100 grams of sauce, these bulk imposters often contain as little as 60 grams of tomatoes per 100 grams. So what makes up the rest of the bottle? It is primarily water, thickened with modified maize starch, and acidified with industrial acetic acid rather than brewed vinegar. You are effectively buying expensive, red-tinted water. The flavor is harsh, acidic, and lacks any of the roasted, cooked-down sweetness of a genuine reduction. It soaks into bread instantly, turning a bacon buddy into a soggy mess because there are no tomato solids to create a barrier. If exposing these labeling tricks helps you protect your family from low-quality fillers, consider subscribing to Protect Our Cart. We are currently finalizing a deep-dive investigation into the olive oil industry that reveals similar adulteration tactics, and having you with us strengthens our ability to demand better standards. So, how do you protect yourself? Now that you know the 8 brands and the categories of deception to avoid, you need a quick forensic checklist for the next time you are in the supermarket aisle. Do not look at the front of the bottle. The front is marketing, the back is the confession. First, perform the 100-gram test. Look at the ingredients list specifically for the phrase, made with X grams of tomatoes per 100 grams of ketchup. If that number is below 120 grams, place the bottle back on the shelf immediately. You are looking at a watered-down product. The gold standard is between 140 and 150 grams. This ensures that the sauce is a reduction, where water has been cooked out to concentrate the flavor, rather than a mixture where water has been added to increase volume.
Second, check the vinegar source. A premium UK ketchup should list spirit vinegar or malt vinegar. If the label simply says acidity regulator acetic acid, you are buying a product acidified with the same chemical compound found in household cleaners, lacking the complex fermentation notes that balance the tomato's sweetness.
Finally, scan for the starch red flag. If modified cornstarch or maize starch appears in the top 3 ingredients, the manufacturer is admitting that they did not use enough vegetable matter to create a natural thickness. They are selling you a binder, not a sauce. The ketchup in your cupboard is more than just a condiment. It is a signal of how much the food industry thinks it can get away with. When you accept the gritty texture of the gastropub fake or the watery output of the value brand, you validate their cost-cutting measures. But when you flip that bottle over and demand high tomato content and natural ingredients, you force the market to correct itself. You deserve a sauce that honors the food you cooked, not a chemical slurry designed to maximize shareholder value. Read the label, check the numbers, and never settle for fake red paste again.